before we talk about your time in Congress, I'd like to go back a little bit. My time in my 20s was really important in shaping my philosophy, partially due to having some encounters where, for example, one time I was mugged, and then a week later I was illegally searched by police just walking down the street. Having those encounters really helped shape my worldview. So I'd like to go back and try to get to know you a little bit and find out how you became the congressman that you became. And let's start with Vietnam and JFK. Obviously, we don't have time to get into like a huge discussion of all these things, but I'd just like to get to know, like, were those important events that kind of shaped you in this individual freedom philosophy?
Well, I would start with something very general because I've been motivated for a long time. And I think it's a factor of curiosity. Some people are more curious than others. Some other people don't ask questions, why? And I was always interested in that, especially in socioeconomic issues. I want to know why people are doing things and why people who seem to be smart do such evil things in our government. So I concentrate on that, trying to figure it out. Of course, I don't have all the answers for that, but it seems to be a real dilemma. But I've always been curious, but I did, with my curiosity, come across with people that I thought were pretty darn smart, and they endorsed some of the social views that I had. And, I got introduced to Austrian economics, a long time ago. And I became fascinated with that because it said, well, this is they were revealing to me stuff that I thought was logical. I said, they didn't get it from me. I guess I got it from them. It's the idea, it's the issue of ideas. Where do they come from? So I've been fascinated though with economics, and it's been narrowed down to more dealing with the monetary issue, realizing that it is a big inclusive area because if you don't have the money and you think you can print your way out of it, it leads to trouble, and we're in that trouble, I'll tell you. And that's it. Even with things going on today are very questionable. Are we going to cut spending and all this? But the big issue is probably not really. A lot of people over the 20, 30 years that I've been interested, a lot of talk of people saying the things that we all like, cut spending, live within our means, but they don't do that. And it ends up spending more and more money. But I think the motivation for this, or what allows them to do that, is the fact that we have a monetary system that has been corrupted. It's turned into a fiat money, and we're allowed our government secretly with the Fed to counterfeit the money and maintain a world presence, a military presence, an economic presence. And you say, well, how could you do it if it's all fake money? Well, there's no competition out there. Most other people have destroyed their currencies as well. But our country was born with an understanding of money because of the runaway inflation of the continental dollar. And so that's why they issued a dictate in the Constitution that only gold and silver should be used. And when I look at all this, maybe wars occur because they have too much spending to set, and the people aren't reacting and saying, hey, why are you all spending this money? And I think the ill effects of the inflation of money, of higher prices and malinvestment, is totally avoided from thinking about it. Just now, they're thinking about cutting back, and I'm all for that, but they're not talking about what's going on in secret. The secret is they're going to still spend. There's still going to be treasury bills, and there's always going to be a purchasers buy of these instruments, and they're going to buy, and it's nothing more than a tax. It's the poor people who suffer because it's a regressive tax. So that's the system that I came across that I thought was very important. So after Bretton Woods in 1971, I just for fun, I was practicing medicine. For fun, I was started to talk about it because it fascinated me. And the more it went, the more involved it seemed to be. I thought maybe it was just inflation. It was narrow issue, but it is a big issue I don't think if you allow a government to print money and get away with it and nobody say anything, you'll destroy the country and the economic values of the country. And we're in the middle of the recognition of we're at that point of destroying the wealth of this country.
For me, it was actually Henry Hazlitt that kind of connected me to Austrian economics. I had read Free to Choose by Milton Friedman and seen the documentary series. I was a big fan of that, but I really didn't know anything about monetary policy. And this was, I was studying economics and entrepreneurship at the University of Iowa back in 2007, but what I really wanted to do was film. And so I dropped out to make a movie that I had written and pursue that career. In order to do that, I started a house painting business. Which was a great idea. It gave me the flexibility I needed, some revenue, but it was right at the peak. I literally started my painting business the month that house prices peaked. So I watched that unfold, not having predicted it, but kind of seeing the effects as a house painter. And then I searched for an economics audiobook and stumbled across the Mises Institute had put out a free copy of Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. And I didn't know what the Mises Institute was or any of that. I just stumbled across it. And so I literally was painting a house and I listened to him basically describe what had happened with our boom and our bust with the housing bubble. And he had written about it in the 1940s. And so that's what gave me the idea to go out and make these documentaries. So for you, was it Hazlitt and Ludwig von Mises? Like what you mentioned, Bretton Woods, like their predictions about what happened with Bretton Woods falling apart. Can you elaborate on that a little more?
Yeah, all the Hazlitt I read very early on. Friedman, I viewed his stuff, and I knew him well, and we were friends, although he was a monetarist. But it was a funny thing. The Austrians don't like him because he wasn't solid on the gold standard. But we would have debates. He said, "Well, I'm not all against that gold." But if you had an honest to God gold standard, it would be like Ron Paul has, it would be okay. So I always with that statement. But he's right about that because when you have just think of our gold standard, they started whittling away. It was $20 an ounce at gold it was related to, and then it went to 35, and then it went to zero because you couldn't own gold. It went on and on. So they all influenced me. Hayek, of course, was somebody that I met. I met a lot of these people, and that had an influence on me. Mises, I heard him lecture. Hazlitt, I knew, and also Hans Sennholz, I got to know very well. But Murray Rothbard was a close friend, and he loved politics as well as economics. He loved doing it. He loved what we would say gossip. He said no, revealing the truth. So he was somebody I knew, and if he would have been the kind that if he had witnessed our presidential races, he would have just been just euphoric about all the activities and how he would explain everything. So he was fascinating. Of course, he was a good friend of Lou Rockwell's, and as I traveled around the country, people would ask me, "What do you do? Where do you get the information?" I would always refer them to Lou's site, Lou Rockwell, and the Mises Institute, and I think that was very beneficial because people would get to it and read. And I think that's where the answer is. I don't think a whole lot about politics. I mean, politics is a consequence of the education. And if you get involved, and people, young people at colleges would say, "Okay, Ron, we agree with you. We like this. What should we do?" And I tell them, just do whatever you want to do. Some people make movies and documentaries. Some people have radio talk show hosts. Some people be writers, some teachers. Some people even run for political office, but you got to know the message, and that has to be the goal. And you have to get convinced that the message is not complicated, and that's why I think it's very appealing to young people. It doesn't seem so complicated. We talked 2 or 3 minutes already on monetary policy and how destructive it is. Young people, can figure this out. You always say, you can't use monopoly money and go out and buy things. So I think that, and I make criticism of ourselves because I think we come up short in describing and explaining this system is competing with the giveaway people. That's hard to compete with. But I think that we should do a better job because it's real hard to compete and have to run against Santa Claus. But that's what has to be done. I don't think it's complicated, and young people especially would recognize it's your life. If you live your own life and you can do anything you want, you won't have taxes, you can, get into your own business, but you can't lie, cheat, steal, or kill. You can't exert aggression against other people. And believe me, that is the road to the maximum amount of peace and prosperity any society could have.
That reminds me of your moment on the debate stage with Rudy Giuliani, where he talked about the golden rule. And back then it was such an extreme thought to say that we should practice the golden rule with the Iraq War beginning and all that. All these years later, there's issues with Ukraine and with Israel and everything. What you were talking about, going back to the individual and allowing individuals to choose. Obviously we're not going to solve the Israeli-Palestine conflict here today, but can you talk about a little bit about how the one state solution isn't going to work because you're forcing one state on all these people, and they've proposed a two-state solution, and maybe they can find a way to make that work, but really at the end of the day, it comes down to the individual. You really have to take it to the nth degree, don't you think?
Well, I don't think it's as clear cut as one state or two states, because in a way we ended up with a one state solution, and people came together and it worked relatively well. But it wasn't complete. But people can come together as long as you introduce one notion voluntarily. And you already mentioned when you're forced to do it, it's a different story. What happened to Europe and the Middle East and most of the world is that foreigners went in and told them what they could do. They'd have World War One, redraw the lines. World War Two, redraw the lines. They're still redrawing lines. And then there are these factions, and that's why non-entangling alliances, which the founders advise us to obey, we should be involved in all this. Robert Taft said, "Why get into NATO? That's just going to lead to problems." So I'm sort of sympathetic to what Trump has been saying. He emphasizes this. He doesn't claim he's a libertarian, but he says some things like that we shouldn't be so engaged with telling people what to do, but it's a temptation that can't be resisted by the people in power around governments, because it's the desire for power and money that will finally get control of the government. So governments are easily corrupted, and that is why you and probably others agree with me that very, very small government is the best to have. And then if somebody comes looking to corrupt the system, maybe we can watch them a little bit more. But now this revelation by Musk is really great, because we're finding, boy, has it been out of control, and how incestuous it's been, and people have been involved. So I think that's good. But I think non-aggression and voluntarism, go a long way. And I think the founders understood that. I think the founders were well versed about natural law, that people writing thousands and thousands of pages of regulations isn't the way to go. They might have a guideline, but just writing more rules won't solve the problem if you don't understand the basic principle. So when Daniel and I talk about these problems, I keep saying, what is the basic principle? What are they doing? Are they counterfeiting money, or are they overstepping bounds? Are they using force? Because that's what has to be done. But I'm always amazed that young people that I've talked to seem to grasp that and like it more than I'd say, the Chamber of Commerce people, because they've been conditioned to work with the government and see how they can influence the government in order. That's not all Chamber of Commerces, obviously, but people that organize and want special privileges and special, appropriations. That's a different thing. And I think I think it's great, and that's probably why I enjoy talking to young people, because even today I have people come up and say, "Well, back in so and so is when I first got interested." So if I do nothing else, because I don't feel like I have the answers as much as I have the enthusiasm and the evidence to show that other people who have had these ideas, that it's a better system, always with flaws. And obviously, our system has had flaws. And right now, the flaws are showing themselves. I mean, we're in bad shape. I think we have a moral bankruptcy. I think we have a financial bankruptcy. And there's always a limit. Bankruptcies always end. Most of the time, they end badly, because rarely does a whole nation, tighten their belts and say, "Oh, we've done it wrong. So what we're going to do is quit wasting our money because it doesn't work." There's a little bit of that attitude, being used right now. I think that's good.
I'm not too hopeful. I mean, I love the cuts that they're trying to make, but the truth of the matter is, with mandatory spending being 2/3 of the budget, I'm not too hopeful that they're going to really be able to do anything when we have an almost $2 trillion deficit. That's one of the things you predicted we showed in our documentary, The Fall of 2008, was back in 2008. You said, not too long from now, we're going to end up having a 3/4 of a $1 trillion deficit, and then by the next year it was 1.4 trillion in 2009. But that's something that basically with the housing bubble, one of the things that we talked about, obviously the Federal Reserve was the core cause, and we showed that. But one of the things we talked about was adjustable rate mortgages, and about how when interest rates would go up, people would be hit with those higher payments and would walk away. It's kind of funny, you have talked about this all these years, but the government, the federal government, really, they're the ones that took out the giant adjustable rate mortgage these last 15 years. And the national debt has just skyrocketed when they were taking advantage of these 0.1% interest rates. But now that we've seen that rise, how do you really see this playing out? I mean, I would love to say, oh, they're going to come in and cut spending like we did in 1920, and we'll, have our recession, but then we'll have a sound footing and we'll be able to improve. But I really I don't see any way that they can just fix this system.
Yeah, I don't think there is a simple political solution to that. You can't say, well, we agree that we shouldn't have a Federal Reserve. Oh, let's elect Ron Paul to appoint the Federal Reserve Board. That's not going to do any good. The Federal Reserve has to be repealed and gotten rid of. So people who get involved in this, are going to continue to use the tools that they have. So that is a big problem, and they always paint it as if it's necessary. And if you don't support the wars, you're unpatriotic. If you don't have a welfare state, then you have no heart, and they put guilt on. But that's out of ignorance. If we could emphasize and get people to believe that if you want peace and prosperity, you have to have liberty. It's no more complicated than that. Well, they say, well, no, it's not going to work. Nobody's going to do that. But it does work to a degree, but it's too slow. I think what happened during COVID was an enlightenment by the people. It was so bad, and people finally woke up. Parents and others went to meetings, and they got rid of school boards. And I think that whole thing helped, the message that Trump has passed out. And he understood it, he knew how to use it, and people are angry. This whole wokeism thing. People thought, well, if you weren't a believer in wokeism, you don't deserve a job. You have to be canceled. And all of a sudden, big companies now, even like Amazon and others, say maybe wokeism isn't such a good thing. Maybe at the past they didn't care. They didn't have a moral fiber. They said, well, maybe wokeism will get us more jobs and we can make more profits. But now the evidence is in. So I think that is good, and attitudes will be shifted. But I'm also very realistic. You know, at the rate we they just had a major vote yesterday on the budget, and Thomas Massey was the only one that saw the light and knew exactly what to do, because political pressure is so strong, and that's not where the answer is. It's the answer in talking to young people. That's why I had just happened to have a homeschool program. You get the young people influence and listen to Tom Woods for history, and listen to some economists. I got a lot of my interest stirred up by Leonard Read, and nobody even hardly knows about him. And yet he was right after World War II in the 50s. He understood this. He was a friend of Mises, helped him when he came over here, and one of his students, what became the head of the Fee Foundation. And this is this to me is the most important thing, is to change people's attitudes. And guess what? If it's a good idea, it can't be stopped. The armies can't deal with people who have good ideas. But that doesn't mean it's clear, free sailing. It just means that if it's there, you got to promote the ideas, because the bad ideas are also promoted that way. But bad ideas are so bad and so threatening and kills people. Those attitudes create wars. But the principles that we endorse means that we're going to give the maximum chance for peace, and out of peace comes the prosperity. And most people, would like to live in a peaceful world and have prosperity. And it just seems that people look into the future and get involved in it. They say, no, you have to know somebody. You have to be a politician. Cite a statistic. Did you know that when people go to Congress and they're making this several significant amount of thousands of dollars, they come out multimillionaires? Yeah, Nancy Pelosi seems to have done pretty well for herself. So that kind of stuff should incite people to say there has to be a better way. And that's why we can't endorse a system that allows governments to do things that you and I can't do. Most people know that your neighbor can't come in your house and steal from you, and they're not allowed to come in and hurt you, and you're not allowed to murder people. But governments do it all the time. And that's Bastia. He said, and that is so simple of a message. Most people said, never thought of that. Never thought of that. Yeah, governments do that. They have an IRS, and there's a super IRS called FinCEN. If they really want to watch people, they advance to international control, and that's all out there. But it's and you say, well, look how powerful they are. Yeah, but look at it coming down. It's coming down, and the cultural Marxists are correct. They cause chaos, and think of the chaos that they've created by destroying all social etiquettes and beliefs, and it's coming down. So there is chaos in the streets, but that should be an opportunity for us. Why don't we offer them something that will take care of it? And that's where I think we come up short.
You've predicted so many important trends in our society. You talked about your book, The School Revolution. That had a huge influence on me, and we saw this huge change these last few years toward alternative schooling, which is just this amazing thing we can point to. Some other things were more negative, like the rise of militarism and the Patriot Act that you predicted. Obviously, you predicted the housing bubble and crash. But let's end on a more positive note. When we did the interviews for the documentary back in 2012, you had talked about, that you weren't necessarily proposing a gold standard. You weren't wanting to force that on people. You just wanted to change the legal tender laws so that we wouldn't have capital gains tax on gold and silver, or sales tax on gold and silver, so people would have that option if they wanted to. So just to end on a more positive note, since then we've had 11 states establish that gold is legal tender. I think it's something like 45 states have had at least partial repeals of sales tax on gold and silver. So that is something that I really did. I was hopeful, but I did not expect that to take on so much, and it seems like it's just going to progress more and more. Do you want to just end on a positive note and talk about that?
I think you bring up a great subject. I think Wyoming just passed something to emphasize that point. They've already passed some laws, they passed more. But, I happen not to be a super promoter of cryptocurrency because I don't understand it. If you want to do it, fine. But no fraud. You can't cheat people and that sort of thing. But I think that as long as it's voluntary and you can do it, you shouldn't be prohibited from it. If I don't, if a country, the eastern part of the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, I think it's 1,000 years. The Byzant was a gold coin that they used, and the world sort of worked around it. So it does last. So I wouldn't say there can be no government, and who's going to describe the government that could establish a gold standard. But I'd want an honest gold standard if they're going to make certificate, because you don't expect people to carry bags of silver and gold around, but you might want to do certificates. And if people worry that, oh, that's what a gold standard would be like. No, you have certificates and guarantees like every place else, and that is something that could be done. But I just want to legalize freedom. That doesn't seem to be hard to understand.
Well, thanks, Ron. I really have enjoyed catching up again, and hopefully we'll run into each other at a Mises Institute event soon.
Jimmy, nice to be with you today.
All this has happened before, and it will all happen again.
The reality is we have gone from a stock market bubble. Now we have a housing bubble, and when it breaks, whatever causes it to pop, then a lot of people are going to find out, oh my God, not only are my stocks down, my house is down too, and now what do I do?
Charlie, this was the day we were afraid to wake up to: the bankruptcy of one major Wall Street investment bank, the shotgun wedding of another.
Can't be distracted. What's going on with the war? What's wrong with the economy? Stop worrying about that.
They're not only doing the wrong thing, they're doing exactly the opposite of the right thing.
We got into our mess by spending too much money, running up too much debt, and printing too much money, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Which, by the way, would seem how we got into this state of affairs in the first place.
You have to work for money, kids.
No, you don't. It comes from the machine in the wall. I've seen it. Yeah, you just have to push buttons.
Take a greater risk on these mortgages, yes. To give families mortgages who they would not have given otherwise, yes.
It means we use the mighty muscle of the federal government in combination with state and local governments to encourage owning your own home. That's what that means.
I ask all of you just one more time to look at that chart. And I wish I had a lot of other charts to show you that would reinforce that.
You can't buy a house before you have a job.
You get a job, you save for a down payment, then you buy the house.
A lot of people are going to find out, oh my God, not only is my stocks down, my house is down too, and now what do I do?
Jim Rogers knew these bubbles were going to burst, but I didn't. Neither did filmmaker Jimmy Morrison, who started a house painting business less than a month after home prices peaked. His timing couldn't have been worse. But we don't have to make those mistakes again. There are people out there who called it, and next time, maybe we can too.
We've got a growing economy, jobs, incomes. We've got very low mortgage rates.
Housing is going to be a disaster in the next 5 years. You sell housing stocks and you sell Ben Bernanke.
One myth that's out there is that what we're doing is printing money. We're not printing money.
These days, they don't need a printing press. All they do is they need a computer keyboard.
So we're not a free market then. There is an invisible, there's a benevolent hand that touches us.
Absolutely. These people in the government apparently don't learn anything at all.
They broke it, and they're trying to fix it by doing more of what broke it in the first place.
The United States can pay any debt it has because we can always print money to do that.
What?
Of course it could happen again, and it's happened before.
Raw materials were allocated between essential and non-essential business.
I hope they don't lose confidence in their government. I can see why there's skepticism, but it's the only government we got.
Whoa, 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 whoa.